Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Am Reading video for Friday, January 27th, 2023. Definitely going up on a Saturday this week. Not too concerned about that. This has been quite the week for me. I've been whining a little about ratcheting stuff going on at work, and this week that culminated in me conducting my first interviews for filling a job position. I've never done it before, so it was a thing. And I had some other things going on in my life as well that I might get to talking about later on in this video. So yeah, lots going on. Kind of wish I were a little further along in my reading than I am, but I still got some good stuff done. And maybe the biggest thing of all is sort of the smallest in the moment, which is that I just read a short story, or technically sketch, from this collection of stories and sketches by Dorothy Parker that, culminated throughout her life at the earlier part of the 20th century, early to mid. Anyway, I've been reading this book, one short story per Am Reading video, since May 2021. And as of today, I just read the final short story. This is basically the culmination of my biggest reading project yet, at least in service of reading just one book. I had a lot of fun with it, and the last sketch in here is called Professional Youth, which she had published in 1923 when she herself was about 30, I believe, and is kind of at the tail end of the group of people she is satirizing. She does a lot of satirizing, and this one was particularly rambly. Although there's an interesting thing going on here, because I felt like somewhat with a lot of these stories, some of the 1920s terminology and cultural stuff could go over my head sometimes, and so there is that particularity to it. But there's also, I think, a lot of universality to the satire she's doing, where she is pillorying young people for thinking that they're so special and that their ideas are so unique and what they're going through has, never been done before. But maybe even also she's pillorying the old generations that are like, oh, well, young people, they just are obsessed with themselves and they only care about, things that they've done. Like there was a line in here about, young people thinking literature started just a few years ago or something like that. And that reminded me just basically of how people continue to talk 100 years later. We just, I don't know, maybe there is a part of being young where you're too taken with your own ideas. And then every older generation says the exact same thing about the young being, too self-absorbed and full of themselves. Although I guess they were like that too, or at least their elders felt the same. So it was an interesting juxtaposition there. The end of quite the project, really. Anyway, I've been thinking a lot, obviously, about Dorothy Parker, especially as I've been reaching the end of this project. And she even came up in one of the events I went to myself earlier this week. My writing salon hosted a short story writers get-together, and someone else mentioned Dorothy Parker, and then I had to chime in. The thing I've taken away most from her is her dashed-off short stories. That's what I called them. Very dialogue-heavy, the ones that are sort of between two people. Sometimes what she was satirizing would get a little old after a while, but I don't know, that was the stuff where I felt like it was the bread and butter. It really was the most compelling and fun for me. So, and I thought also she could, teach something to short story writers about satire and dialogue and that sort of thing. Oh, and so, yeah, I have a lot to think about. I have all of these rambly videos of me reviewing every short story and such that she's done, and now I want to go ahead and write a quick review on Goodreads. It's such a project, really. It's been a lot of fun, actually, in its way. And maybe hard to let go of Dorothy Parker. And in fact, maybe I don't have to. Something else that happened this month on a more sad note is one of her more famous biographers just died this month. Marian Mead. And so I went ahead and I looked up the biography she wrote of Dorothy Parker in the 1980s, which was called Dorothy Parker, What the Fresh Hell Is This? Which seems to go with Parker's affectation, at least so far as they're in her stories, the satire and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should, carve out some time to read this biography. It would be fun to get another sense of her after, getting the sense of her from reading her short stories. So there's, of course, so much to read at all times, but hopefully I can squeeze that in sometime in the near future. But speaking of books I do hope to squeeze in the near future, and continuing with trends, I enjoyed, as I've been saying, reading and reviewing these short stories, one per am reading video, that I thought I should continue with it. And so I would need, starting in February, a new collection now that Dorothy Parker is over, and I figured I would go with this one. This is Oi Caramba, an anthology of Jewish stories from Latin America, edited by Ilan Stavins. I have been reading from this very slowly, basically one per year for another type of video I do, the try a story tag videos, and I figure if I actually want to finish this book in my lifetime, maybe I should pick up the pace a little, because even one a week is better than one a year. So anyway, I'm excited to, get a faster go at this. These are a bunch of short stories by Jews living in Latin America, giving a lesser known perspective on Jewish life. So yeah, stay tuned, because I will be reviewing story by story, going from where I left off in my last video, starting in February. Okay, now on to my more traditional reading of novels and short story collections that I try to complete a bit faster as we do. And I'll start with the one novel that I actually finished this week, although it's a little bit of a downer in a way, because it is IDAHO by Emily Ruskovitch, and I went ahead and I gave this 2 stars, which is something I really rarely do. But as I was reviewing and getting annoyed with this book, I thought, well, maybe it's more accurate to my real feelings than to give it a pity 3 stars. Maybe I'm going to be more critical this year. I don't know, in my reviewing. But anyway, I talked about this, or complained or whined or something about this in the last video. I'll try to give a little bit of a synopsis, such as there is one for this literary fiction novel. The general crux of the story is that we're following this family in Idaho, and there's a tragedy that took place in their lives where the youngest daughter of this family of 4 is killed violently, suddenly, shockingly by the mother, who goes to jail for it. And we, it's not a chronological timeline. We go back and forth. We follow the mother, Jenny, in jail, and one of her cellmates. We follow her soon-to-be ex-husband, Wade, who, among other things, is suffering from early onset dementia, which I think is supposed to be a commentary on how grief and, forgiveness or blame, is a little transitory in that way when, you forget details. And he, meanwhile, goes ahead and marries a second wife, Anne, who is a little bit younger than him and knew the family a little bit, and is obsessed with sort of the goings-on. One of the major other things is the older daughter witnessed the murder, so the story goes, and then disappeared into the woods, and so they have been searching for her, but as the story goes on, decades pass and she is never found. There's secondary characters as well who take center stage, including a man who does do paintings of victims who have disappeared as they age, and so he starts communicating with Anne and Wade. There's another young man in town who we follow a bit, who might have more of a role than I realized. The truth is, I couldn't connect with this story. These characters didn't feel real to me. There was completely one-dimensional. There was a lot of self-abnegation, especially with Jenny. All we know about her is she committed this inexplicable act of violence and basically punished herself for it for the rest of her life, and there's no real reasons or given for why. And I went into reading Goodreads reviews, trying to understand what other people saw or didn't like, or in this novel, and I came upon an interesting one where one of the readers posited that the whole conceit was actually that the older daughter killed the younger sister, and the mother went to jail to basically protect her older daughter. And this might speak to the conceit that this is supposed to kind of be a mystery novel, but without all of the genre conceits of actually following the whodunit, because, this is literary, heaven forbid. And that really annoyed me even more. The fact that, I guess that if this was the story, it is so deliberately obtuse. Like, she doesn't want to come out and say anything because heaven forbid that wouldn't be, literary enough. And I love literary fiction. I'm not even a mystery fan, but I feel like if you're going to try to go for those conceits, you should go for them and not bury the lead. I mean, it just feels like none of these characters felt real to me. Nothing about this. I mean, there was beautiful language I couldn't even connect to because it wasn't connected to real characters. All of these ruminations were like floating free in the air. That's how I felt about it. I just was highly unimpressed, and I feel like if the actual story was that the whole thing was a cover-up, but she didn't want to say it because that would be too genre, that's even more annoying. And maybe that's not what she was doing. I don't know. But this novel really did not work for me. And I felt like I had to give it 2 stars. I should say there are past timeline chapters where we follow the 2 young girls shortly before the younger daughter is killed. And the older sister is obviously annoyed with her, like, tagging along a little bit. And, there's other, pretty normal sisterly stuff going on, very bland characterization that I feel like, I don't know, I don't think it really leads to saying that the older daughter is, a cold-hearted murderer or anything. It's 9 years old, but anyway. Another book where I feel like I'm having more trouble than I thought I would is this latest edition of the Best American Short Stories collection with the series editor of Heidi Pittler and the guest editor of Andrew Sean Greer. I read the latest edition in Bass every year in January as like something to start out my year with. And I generally like these collections, but I'm not connecting as much this year. I feel like maybe I'll go ahead and do something crazy, like give it 3 stars on Goodreads or something. I don't know. Maybe it would be good for me anyway, because since this is an ongoing book project where I read a new one per year, maybe I should differentiate between ones I like more and less. And for whatever reason, I feel like these stories just aren't clicking with me, and I was meaning to be much further ahead in them by this Am Reading video. Like in the last Am Reading video, I'd read 5, and right now I've read 5 more, so I've read 10 of the 20 stories so far, and only a handful, a much smaller handful than usual, have left a huge impression on me, enough for me to, want to make notes on as for my upcoming review. And maybe one of the ones I'll highlight here just as making an impression on me is Post by Alice McDermott. And part of it might just be because it's a pandemic story and the way it was talking about the quarantine of 2020 and just that crazy new social reality of feeling like you're in exile from your life and it's just right outside your door where, you're not allowed to go. And particularly because, this also takes place in New York and I live outside of DC, so there is this city life of the city is right outside. Like I could stand on my balcony and look out to DC where I used to go into work every day, and they have a scene where the 2 characters in this story are like looking out to Manhattan wondering, are people still alive out there when they're in Brooklyn? I mean, it's just so crazy how disconnected a lot of us were for a while. And then there's also actual, COVID case going on here, going on during the height of the pandemic when, you don't just easily go to the hospital unless it's like a really bad case. Just all the sort of very particular realities of 2020, which I feel like, just she wrote them, I guess, compellingly, I thought, on the page. But anyway, yeah, I have 10 more stories to go. I would like to finish this up like by the end of this month or in early February. So I am hoping once again to, pick up my pace a bit. And maybe if, my tune might change, maybe these next 10 stories will really turn the tide for me. We shall see. The next book I am still in the middle of that I had just started, I think, at the last video, is The Actual Star by Monica Byrne. I actually have a physical copy this time. I'm still mostly listening to it on audio, but I decided to get a physical copy as well, mostly for the glossary in the back, because this is a really heavy world building book. So I felt like the glossary could be useful. I might actually also try, reading and listening at the same time to get a better context for all of the words and everything. Because, yeah, this is very heavy, deep world building sort of book. So this is a three-tiered storyline. I feel like there's other words that I should remember for these sorts of things, but it's a type of book where there's a past storyline, a present storyline, and a future storyline, and we go back and forth between the storylines and see how they connect. Which in this case is very much based on Mayan culture and is exciting and non-Western, really, a way to look at philosophies and beliefs that could shape society. So the first storyline takes place in 1012, which is actually near the end of the Mayan Empire reign, like the last of sort of the rulers of Mayan empires, I think, were being disposed of around this time. And that's largely what's happening in this storyline, which follows the rulers or ascendant rulers of one of the final Mayan kingdoms. And then 1,000 years later, it's 2012, which you might remember actually is in popular culture known as the Mayan end of world date, which I think more accurately Byrne goes into here. It's more about like an end and renewal cycle stuff, not like, apocalypse sort of stuff. Although, I don't know, with this maybe a little bit, but that might have more to do with climate change. But anyway, in this storyline, we're following a half Mayan girl named Leah, who goes to Belize from America to try to find out about her father's heritage, and she feels this immediate pull to a specific Mayan cave that also features heavily in the first story. And she is interacting with some of the locals, particularly tour guides there. And then finally, we go 1,000 more years into the future, into 3012, in a highly changed society, pandemic, post-apocalyptic in a way, because post-climate change, where human civilization has been much reduced, all of the ice caps have melted. There's a lot of amazing new technology that allows people to live nomadic lifestyles. There's a lot of changes to societal structure. Everyone is following this one religion that is based off of Mayan culture and off of Leah, who has become this saint-like figure. And a religion has sort of been made in her name, part by her contemporaries, and I think, part going on. There's so much detail in it. It's strange in a way, because I almost feel like I'm frustrated by, there's only one religion in the world, and it's just so sort of, I want to say one note in a way, the way what its strict orthodoxies are, and there is this idea that there is only one way you're allowed to be, sort of thing, and there's very little deviation. In fact, the major crux of the storyline is the main character trying to challenge some of the beliefs and getting a lot of huge pushback in terms of basically an inquisition coming against her. It, I think, is really meant to challenge the idea of utopian society, although I feel like this is kind of a far-left utopian society. A lot of the language they use feels like it's, relatively modern from far-left discourse about and less far left discourse even about the dangers of capitalism and of ethno-states and things that divide people that way, and how this utopia's done away with them, and it's done away with a lot of our ideas of gender conformity. Everybody here identifies by female pronouns, or are supposed to, but they have sexually are able to be modified to have all both female and male gender reproductive organs. There's a lot of sexuality in these books that I feel like could be jarring for some people, how just constant and on the page it is in these societies. And I think it's meant to challenge you. I don't know if you're entirely meant to agree with everything politically that seems to be on the page. I mean, I do feel like, it's almost an agenda, but at the same time, I do think maybe you are supposed to not think that the world is as simple as some of these characters do. But I do think most of the characters come off more as mouthpieces for their philosophical beliefs and not much else going on beyond that with them, which I'm not sure is my favorite. In fact, a lot of people don't like the present day storyline, but I feel like those characters maybe are have the most dimension behind their politics going on, although maybe it's just bias because I don't have to do as much heavy lifting for understanding the world building or those characters, and even some of those characters I think are a little too one-dimensional, particularly secondary characters. So there's a lot going on, a lot that I should be taking more notes on this, because I do hope to write a blog about this and a similar book, Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is also about multi-timelines and how things coalesce with each other. And there's so much that's similar and different about the books that's just fascinating to think about. There's just a lot to think about in here. It's certainly a very unique, innovative book. I think for people interested in high concept science fiction and fantasy, they'd get a lot out of this. So I'm nearing the end now and have a lot to think about. I'm sure hopefully my review will be much more detailed and compelling on Goodreads, but it is a journey, this book. I mean, even if I feel like I'm struggling a little and I'm not sure if I like the political bent all of the time that Monica Byrne is into, it is definitely a book that is very unique, and it's worth your time for the world building, especially in the past and the future, and I'm intrigued to see how it'll all fit together. And the final book I want to talk about right now is Ask Again Yes by Mary Beth Keane, which I'm also almost finished with, but not entirely yet. But anyway, this is a literary fiction novel that I picked from my latest page 112 tag, where I'm trying to whittle away my physical unread shelves. So I'll link to that video down below. And I'm enjoying this one so far. This is the story of two families who start to get to know each other in the 1970s, or the two patriarchs do, because they are both on the police force in New York City, and decide as they're getting married and starting families, they want to move to a fictional suburb outside of the city. They have their families growing up next door to each other for a while, but things are starting to go wrong with a couple of the parents, particularly the Stanhopes. The mother, Anne, has undiagnosed mental illness, which leads to violent, paranoid reactions to things. And the father, Brian, seems to be in a bit of denial, maybe has a bit of a drinking problem himself. And their son Peter is growing up in that household. He is close to his neighbor of a similar age, Kate, who's the daughter of the other police officer. And Anne is paranoid and does not like Peter, getting along with Kate, and is trying to break up this friendship. And this leads to a pretty tragic, dynamic, inciting incident that happens in the book that changes the trajectory of the families in very significant ways. For a while, after this incident, the Stanhopes move away and the family rather disperses. Peter goes to live with an uncle, and Peter and Kate lose contact for several years until college, when Peter reaches out to her again, and Kate, meanwhile, she's been trying to live her life, apparently, and just doesn't connect well with other people. But once Peter's back in her life, they pick up where they left off, and they ultimately start a relationship. And by this point, the novel's sort of moved more quickly near the end, and they are married, they have kids, and we're dealing with something that the parents talked to them about earlier on, which is that, the trauma that Peter suffered in his home with the undiagnosed illness of his mother and what is his father's alcoholism and sort of checking out of life, that stuff shapes people. So that, one of the major things, Kate, when she, argues with her family, why are you blaming Peter for what happened? Because it wasn't his fault. He was a kid when the climactic or inciting incident happened. Don't blame us. We're allowed to have feelings for each other. And Kate's parents are saying it's bigger than that. When you come from a background like that, it has an effect on you. So you have to think about what it'll be like for you in this relationship down the road. And indeed, down the road, Peter seems to be suffering from alcoholism and probably other issues as well that these very Irish people who don't seem to believe in therapy aren't really dealing with head on. That's my major thing is, everyone should see a therapist. And I feel like, she gets to that in here, but everybody sees it as, being forced to the shrink rather than it actually being helpful. Or actually, I guess Anne ultimately finds it helpful, but her case is pretty severe. So, yeah, I find that compelling. I do think, I guess in a way, some of the things this suffers from is that things can feel a little flat sometimes. Like everything is so focused in on these specific instances that the rest of their lives feel a little flat. I don't know, maybe it's one of those things about contemporary storytelling and how we don't write sprawling Victorian novels anymore where we can think about so many subplots or whatever, but I kind of wish that some of the other characters felt a little more fleshed out, maybe, I don't know. There's just this whole thing of Kate and Peter being so obsessed with each other that the rest of their lives don't seem to matter, which are barely on the page. I don't know how nitpicky this is, because I do feel like the main story is compelling enough. And then, though we also do, ultimately do a lot of, skipping through time near the end. And it makes me wonder maybe if the opposite should have been true, that maybe this should have been, a story that took place in a much more small slice of life and that the rest of this was just backstory, but then maybe too much backstory exposition wouldn't be a good thing. So I'm not sure what I'm saying. I'm just trying in my head to wonder if there was a way that I could make this book feel like it would be a book that I would rate 5 stars and absolutely love versus where it is right now where I feel like, oh, I'm really liking this and I think I'll give it 4 stars. Is there something that would improve it for me rather than me thinking it's sort of run-of-the-mill, with enticing characters, but with enough of the generic, I guess, pitfalls of contemporary storytelling about, what's missing, that I'm not falling completely in love with it. I don't know. I'm overthinking everything. Ultimately, I'm feeling like my takeaway is I'm glad I'm reading this. It's a fun, enjoyable read. I'm interested in the characters and the psychology insofar as they're on the page, and I look forward to finishing it and giving it a pretty good review. So that about covers it for me now. So I will link to my latest page 112 tag video down below. I don't usually link to more information on the books I've reviewed on these AM reading videos down below, but maybe I should at least for the ones I just mentioned, like Oi Caramba and the Dorothy Parker biography. So, click down below if you're interested. I will be back on this channel in the next couple of days, hopefully before the end of January, for my monthly book haul video. So excited to get a new year of acquiring books under my belt, starting that off. So stay tuned for that. This weekend I get to take off the work mantle a little bit, but I will be doing some other things. I got some obviously reading goals and also some writing goals. I'm going back to my salon for my usual purpose of drafting, writing fiction. And I also have a dress rehearsal coming up for a flash choir event that my synagogue is putting on February 4th. So I'm excited to get that rolling as well. So yeah, good stuff coming up for me. Hope you all are also having an enjoyable weekend. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.